let's see here. Why did it do that? Let's do this. There we go. Perfect. So, don't tell me it's going to keep doing this. All right. So this is obviously an experiment. Thought I had it all set up for some reason. Facebook Live here keeps wanting to switch to my other camera, and I'm hoping it will stop doing that here. So if you are joining me for the live webinar, welcome. And so yeah, awesome. So the plan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in this webinar, again, this is just kind of an experiment, see how this goes. Take some good, take some bad, see what happens with the next one. But I'm going to talk about a concept that I've, kind of come up with recently called the 4 cardio quadrants. I don't know why quadrants are just help me make sense of concepts, and so I've been using them a lot lately. But this one is the 4 cardio quadrants, and it helps to pinpoint, one, like where your sport, where your sport specific needs are versus maybe another sport and their specific needs are, and then also to look at our sport, specifically as mountain bikers, and look at the different parts of it and be able to identify, like, well, what, specifically do I need to improve? Because at the end of the day, not all cardio is created equal. And while that sounds obvious, we need some way to kind of quantify that, right? And then have some discussions on where things fall, whether they're sports or specific things in the sport, and then training methods to help improve those things. And so I'm just going to present here for a bit. If you got some questions or anything, feel free to comment, and I'll get to some questions here at the end or as we're going, if some ones pop up. But anyways, excited to do this, see how this goes. Hopefully you guys enjoy this, and I will talk to, we'll get going on this thing. So just making sure this thing is still running straight. So cool. All right, so here we go. Excuse me. So I got some notes here. I got my whiteboard. It's a little old school. I was trying to get a PowerPoint presentation put together, but couldn't figure out how to make it work with this Facebook Live thing. So still got a few technical difficulties I'm working on. But anyways, this will suffice. So like I was saying, the whole concept here, the 4 cardio quadrants, is based on the idea that not all cardio is created equal, and that just doing something that looks like your sport or making yourself breathe hard may not actually be improving what you need to improve as a mountain biker, or for whatever sport activity you're trying to work on. And so again, this sounds obvious, but like I mentioned, we need to have some way to quantify this. And so if you think about it, we have some things like heart rate training and power training. These things are attempts to quantify this, because again, there's we understand that performing your cardio at this heart rate is different than performing it at this heart rate, and you're going to get different results and different stuff from that, or power, which is a measure of your the tension and speed that you're creating. And so there are attempts to quantify this, because again, it's obvious we need, not all cardio and cardio training is created equal. But again, some of these things have limitations. So for example, like heart rate training, as you get into higher tension situations, there's a lag with the heart rate. So like when you're jogging or at a moderate intensity, your heart rate reflects your effort level, pretty quickly. Whereas once you ramp up to a certain effort level, you're going to see the heart rate lag a little bit, meaning that during the activity, it's not going to necessarily go as high as what that effort level is reflecting. And a lot of times it's after you're done with that activity that the heart rate actually increases. And so again, if you think about like climbing a steep hill that's got like you got to grind up, that you're in that high tension mode, And if you think about it, it's, the heart rate, yeah, you're breathing hard, but your heart rate isn't really out of control while you're doing it. It's when you get to the top and you relax, it goes higher. And so the heart rate has, some drawbacks. Power, it's very specific to just pedaling, right? Like there are other applications for power, but again, it's a little limited, and especially when we're talking about mountain biking and cycling, we tend to be talking about using power training specifically for training the pedal stroke, which is one part of riding, but it's not the only part. And so we need some way to kind of quantify the rest of what's going on so that we can figure out, like, okay, what do we need, and then what kind of training methods will help fit into that, right? So the other thing that you need to keep in mind is that cardio is very context specific. And, athleticism in general tends to be context specific. And so being athletic in one sport doesn't mean that you're going to be athletic in another sport. And so having great cardio for one thing doesn't mean you're going to have great cardio for another thing. And a really good example of this is if you look at, you take a cyclist and you test his VO2 max on a bike, and then you take that same guy and you test him on a treadmill where he's running, especially if he doesn't run at all. And so he's very inefficient. This is not a movement that he's good with. You're going to see a difference in his VO2 max, right? So like, well, which is it? His VO2 max should be his VO2 max, but it's not. His VO2 max is actually context specific. So again, it just speaks to understanding that the context is everything when it comes to your training in general, and especially with your cardio training. Like, you definitely have to be making sure that you are training the right context, or you're going to be just wasting your time and missing out on a lot of stuff. So what is the context? Like, what are we trying to do with our training? And so if you look at it, like cardio training in general, the term cardio training is a little misleading because the cardiovascular system is a part of the overall organism. It's a part of the overall system. So I'm not trying to isolate and just train the cardio system. I have to look at it in the context. I'm really trying to train my endurance, right? Or you could say like your cardiovascular endurance. And so it's the endurance that you're wanting to train, not just trying to train and improve your cardio system. And so what you're really trying to do is look at, okay, what is the cardio system? How does that fit into the overall picture of what we're doing? And so if you look at where does the cardiovascular system fit into creating movement, because really that, at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We want to have better endurance for our movements, and we want to have better cardio for our movements. And so where does it fit in this whole movement production thing, right? And it's not the first thing, right? Like, you don't start breathing hard and then start moving. You start moving and then you start breathing hard. Your cardiovascular system is trying to fuel the movement. Well, what creates movement? Well, movement is created by tension. Okay, your brain sends a signal to the muscles to create tension in a specific pattern. And it's that tension creation that creates movement. And then it's actually that tension that your cardiovascular system is fueling. And so, understanding that the tension demands and the context of the tension is super important for you to, keep in mind. And that's really the key at the heart of all of this is understanding that right there. So sport-specific training, at the end of the day, really is about understanding what these specific tension demands are, and then how to work on improving them through your cardio training and other training methods. And so that's what it's about. It's not about doing things that look like your sport or doing things that just make you breathe hard. If you're not taking the context of your cardio, of what you're actually doing in your sport, what we're doing on the trail, then you can be missing the boat. You can be training something completely different than what you actually need. And so, like, one of the best examples of this is on the trail, mountain biking. We get forced into high tension, low RPM situations. There's no getting around it. Like, you can try to sit and spin all you want, but you are going to have to, at some point, shift into a lower gear and grind. A lot of times this requires standing up as well, right? If you're trying to maneuver through a technical section of trail, especially like a technical climb, you're having to stand up, you're having to use a lot of high tension movement in order to do this. But then you take a look at how are a lot of riders training their quote unquote cardio for mountain biking. And a lot of the cardio training that we do as mountain bikers is heavily influenced by road riding, which again, once you see the quadrant, you understand what it means. You'll see like, oh, that's why this stuff doesn't work for us. But when you take a look at their training, a lot of their training is seated, low tension, high RPM, pedaling. And so you're training the cardiovascular system to fuel that specific type of tension. That's the context that the cardiovascular system is getting better in. And then you go and you get on the trail and you're forced into those high tension, low RPM situations, and your cardiovascular system does not have training in that context. So it's not efficient at fueling that type of tension. And so you're going to it's going to feel very hard. You're going to blow through your cardio even quicker. So even your easier efforts are going to feel harder because every time you get pushed into these low RPM, high tension situations, you're just going to be blowing through your cardio because you're so inefficient with that specific tension demand, that context right there. So again, if you've seen my energy systems demand cardio programs, that's why I have the HTLR, the high tension, low RPM intervals in the program, because if you're not addressing the high tension, low RPM stuff in your cardio training, but you need it on the trail, like you're missing something. And again, this explains why people who spend so much time doing these road riding influenced or like spin class type cardio training, and then they go and they get on the trail and they wonder like, well, why am I not seeing the carryover from all this effort I'm putting in here to the trail? And so this is why you got to understand that context there, and that low RPM, high tension pedaling is one of them. And so when you break it down, the cardio demands are going to fall into a couple of spectrums. Okay, and remember, these are spectrums. You're going to have things that sit on the extreme. You're going to have a lot of things in the middle, but you're going to be able to classify any sport and anything that you do within that sport somewhere on these two spectrums, okay? And so the first spectrum is our mono movement versus multi-movement, okay? Let me grab my pin here. And so mono movement, put mono on this side, and then you put multi on the other end. Boom. Okay, we got mono and multi-movement activities in sports. Now, mono movement it's one movement, right? It's a cyclical movement. So the easiest thing to think of is pedaling your bike or running, right? These are cyclical movements. These are single movements that you're doing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again for long periods of time, right? So running a marathon is a mono movement sport, okay? Riding a century or super long distance on a road bike tends to be a predominantly mono movement sport. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have multi-movement sports, and these are sports and activities that require multiple movements to complete. And so you may have some cyclical movements in there, but they're going to be broken up quite often, and they're going to be broken up by a lot of different movements. All right, and so and again, like a way to think about this would be like running track being a mono movement sport, and playing soccer being a multi-movement sport, right? They both do a lot of running, but soccer is a multi-movement sport. The demands are going to be different than a mono movement sport. And so for us, road riding predominantly is a mono movement sport. I know that there's other movements involved, but when you look at the predominant thing going on there and the importance of it, pedaling is the predominant thing. And so it tends to be a mono movement sport. And then on the other end is multi-movement, which is where mountain biking tends to fall. Mountain biking is a much more multi-movement sport than road riding is. Your downhill skills are much more important. Your efficiency with your movement and skills on your bike and on the trail are much more important than they are on road riding. So again, you do have pedaling. Pedaling is important. You have this cyclical mono movement thing that you're doing. But again, if you look at pedaling your bike, a lot of times you're not pedaling for long periods of uninterrupted time. A lot of times you are pedaling for a relatively short period of time, and then that's broken up with you having to do some sort of other movement, and then you go pedaling again, and then you do some sort of movement. And so it's a multi-movement sport, right? And even within the sport of mountain biking itself, you can look at something like cross-country riding. And cross-country riding and racing is going to be more of a mono-movement sport or activity compared to downhill riding. And again, it's not that those things aren't, the technical skills and all those things are important for cross-country. We're just talking about where they fall on the spectrum, right? Like where I would argue that your cross-country riding and racing is going to fall somewhere on the spectrum further to this side than downhill racing is going to fall more to that multi-movement side. And so again, it gives you a way to kind of classify the movement, because again, not all movement demands are the same. And so if you look at a sport that is predominantly mono movement, and you're in a multi-movement sport and you're trying to mimic their cardio training, which is geared towards helping them improve their cardio for this singular movement, then may not be helping you, right? Like you may identify that as your weakness, and that's fine. But if you're just, if you don't understand the context, then you can choose the wrong program for what you're looking for. So again, this is why, if you're a downhill racer following a road riding influenced cardio training program, it's better than nothing, and you're going to fill a lot of time, but it's really not the best use of your time that you could be doing. And so that's mono versus multi-movement. The next one is going to be high tension and low tension movement. Okay, so up here we're going to have high, and down here we'll have low. Okay, and so again, low tension and high tension movement. If you think about it, anything is going to kind of fall in this spectrum here. Probably the easiest way to think about it is if you think about running. Okay, running is the same movement, same activity, but sprinting is a much higher tension expression of that activity. Sprinting requires much more tension in the muscles, doing a 100-meter sprint. This is why they can't sustain those speeds for longer than 10 seconds or so, because the amount of tension that you're generating is unsustainable for longer than that. And so, but then you take a look at jogging or running a marathon. Okay, you're able to do that for much longer because there's a much lower tension demand. The tension demand is much lower, and so you're able to sustain it for longer. And so, but again, it's the same movement, right? We're running, but it's the difference between sprinting and jogging is mainly the tension demand that you're requiring of the system to do the movement. And so looking at this in our context, road riding tends to be a low tension activity. Now, I don't mean that like low tension isn't easy. It tends to be a low tension, high RPM activity, which is a high power. They're wanting that super high RPM, which you're not going to be able to create that high RPM with a lot of tension at the pedal. So it's a low tension movement, high RPM, so it's hard, right? We're not talking about low tension being easy. We're just talking about what are the overall tension demands. And again, relative to other sports, other movements, other things. Okay, if you're looking at it relative to other things, that is a low tension, high RPM sport. But now you take a look at mountain biking. It tends to be more on the high end. Okay, we talked about how you're forced into these high tension, low RPM situations on the trail, and a lot of riders aren't prepared for them from their cardio training programs. And so again, it's because they're not training that specific tension demand. You're not training those high tension, specific training demands through a cardio training program that is geared to help an athlete with a low tension, high RPM demand. And so again, you can even within the sport, right? We talked about like cross country versus downhill. Cross country is going to be a lower tension activity than downhilling. Downhilling, this is why you can't sustain those paces for like more than 5 minutes, give or take. Again, like when you're delivering maximum tension, it's not sustainable for long periods of time. But those tension demands are specific, right? And so, again, there is something to carry over, like, training high tension will carry over to low tension stuff better than low tension will carry over to high tension stuff. But all things being equal, the athlete who is training at their specific tension demands is going to improve better than the athlete who isn't and is relying on some sort of like carryover or what the heck effect or whatever you want to call it, right? So we want to make sure that we're training the specific tension demands of our sport. And so when you can see when you lay these guys across each other that you get these quadrants. And so these quadrants you can pretty much break down any sport into one of these or the activity within the sport, right? So I will say a couple things here before I go into some specifics of how we can use this as mountain bikers to help us out. One, you may find that your sport tends to fall in one of these quadrants, right? Like you should be able to classify almost any sport into one of these 4 quadrants. But 2 things to keep in mind with that. One, you need some fitness in all of these quadrants. And so you still need to have some other activities that are addressing these other quadrants. You just need to understand that for your sport, the specific demands are going to be this specific quadrant. And just keep that in mind when you're making training decisions and figuring how much time am I going to spend on these other methods, right? So if you're spending more time than you need to on something that's not actually in the quadrant, then you may be wasting some time. Again, like, my example of the downhill racer who uses a road riding influence training program to build their cardio, right? Like, yeah, it's better than nothing, and there's going to be some carryover from that. But if you're working on what was really like a mono movement, low tension activity, and you are a high tension multi-movement athlete, which is what downhill racers are, like, you don't want to be devoting a lot of time to this quadrant because there are other things that you could be doing, maybe not training. Like there's so many things that you can be doing besides like work, right? Like there's mental training, there's mobility and recovery tactics, there's just rest, right? Like there are other things that you can be doing as an athlete besides just working to get better. And so anyways, that's just again like a really good example of how an athlete can make a mistake and choose a program that is actually addressing a quadrant that's not what they're in. And this is why you see some frustration with athletes that have that happen. The other thing is that even though you may find that you have your sport falls within one of these 4 quadrants, once you start breaking down any sport and getting into it, you're going to find that specific activities within that sport are going to be peppered throughout this. Okay, you're going to find that most of them will probably fall within the predominant one, but you're going to have other things. And so you may assess that for you specifically, you have a weakness in one of these other quadrants in the context of your sport. And so you may find that you do need to spend some time focused on training these areas because there is a specific thing in your sport that you need to do that falls out of the general thing, but you need to improve that, right? And so there are exceptions to this. It's not like, my sport falls in this quadrant, so that means that's all I need to be focused on. Everything needs to be just focused on that quadrant right there, right? And no, for general health, you need to focus on the other stuff, and you also need to make sure that you are addressing your specific needs, and you may find that you have a specific need outside of that you need to address as well. So, this is a flexible concept, but it helps give context to what we're, talking about here. And so, again, the lines may get blurry with this, like, where does this fall and where does that fall? But, I feel like this at least gives us some sort of context to have those discussions. And it's not, like there's some sort of objective thing. It's either high tension or low tension. Where would you place it, right? We may argue a little bit as to where on this it's gonna go, but it's gonna fall somewhere in high tension and low tension. And same thing with mono and multi movement. Like everything's gonna fall somewhere in there. And so we can use this to give us some sort of context to talk about what we're doing in our sport as mountain bikers, and also look at other sports to decide, well, what are they actually trying to do? So how applicable is what they're doing to what we need, right? And so, so kind of looking at these quadrants in specifically, the first one here, the mono movement low tension. Again, I touched on this already. Like road cycling tends to fall in this category. Jogging and running, like long distance running, tends to fall in this category. Like you're sitting and spinning. You're sitting, low tension, high RPM spinning is going to fall in this mono low tension category. Just sitting and just cruising along. Doesn't even have to be a high RPM spin, but just anytime that you're pedaling and you're not having to create a lot of tension in the system, that's also going to fall in this mono, low tension quadrant. On the other end here, we're going to have mono high tension. So this is going to be our high tension pedaling. And, we've talked about this several times already. Like we get forced into this quadrant. This is an important quadrant for you to train as a mountain biker. The stronger you are with this quadrant, your high tension pedaling, the stronger you're going to be as a rider. Like the easier you're going to be able to attack hard sections of trail, and the less those hard sections of trail are going to tax you. And so that ability to get through them easier while burning less energy is going to help these other quadrants, because the energy that you're spending in one is going to draw from the overall pool, right? Your body only has so much energy to give to any of these quadrants. So that's why you want to make sure you don't have one of them that's overdrawing from that. So if this is a weakness and you're going here a lot and it's overdrawing from the overall energy demands, then it's going to cause problems in the with the overall performance. And so again, this is one of the things that confuses mountain bikers a lot, is that towards the end of a ride, even just sitting and spinning, man, just feels you're wasted, you're tired, you're so tired. And so you're sitting there you're thinking about, okay, what do I need to improve? And oh man, I need to improve my sitting and spinning, because man, towards the end of a ride, sitting and spinning is just so tiring. It's like, oh, that's what I got to work on. But if you really look at what happened, it's all those high tension demands. Every time you had to stand up and pedal, every time you had to go into high tension mode, your body was just drawing just so much energy from the overall just stores that you have, that by the end of the ride, you don't have energy for anything. It all feels like crap, right? And so it's not that this is a weakness, it's that you just don't have any energy to put to this anymore, because this pulled from it so hard that there's nothing left. Okay, so like making sure that this is a strength for you as a mountain biker is super important, super important. So again, this is, your high tension pedaling, grind type pedaling, that's where this is going to fall. So coming over here, we've got our high tension multi movement. And so this is what I would classify as like anytime you're standing up and you're not pedaling, right? Like so downhill situations, you're manualing or bunny hopping, getting through a rock garden. So where you're using your movement and your skills and those things to pilot your bike through a high tension situation. Okay, hitting a jump and absorbing an impact. All of these things are going to fall into this high tension multi movement category, because they tend to you tend to have to switch from one to the other, to the other, and one is never just a perfect replica of the previous one, right? It's always a little bit different. Every corner is a little bit different. Every landing is a little bit different. Everything's a little bit different. And so you're constantly having to adjust in these little micro movements and adjustments that your body's having to make. And so that is your high tension multi movement stuff on the trail. And then finally, you've got this low tension multi movement, which for a lot of riders is a mystery. They're like, well, what the hell is that, right? Like, what are we doing that's a lot of movement, but it's low tension? Because, if it's low tension, I'm sitting and spinning. And if it's high tension, well, I'm standing up and I'm like moving around and doing this. So like, what do I need this low tension, multi-movement thing for? And so this is actually a super important category for us as riders. This is where you get what I call free speed, right? I had a friend on Kauai when I lived on Kauai for 3 years. and he would talk about just how there's free speed everywhere on the trail if you know where to look for it, right? Like you know how to pump, you know how to get to a corner, you know how to hit a little bump here and catch the backside of that there. It's momentum, right? Like people forget, like you don't want to pedal. Pedaling's not the goal of riding. Momentum is the goal of riding. The more momentum you have, the faster you're going. Now, pedaling is one way to get momentum, but it's not the only way, right? Like you can use your skills to actually increase and maintain your momentum, like pumping out of a corner, or there's so many things that you can do that if you have crappy skills and you go into a corner and you just blow all your speed and then you got to pedal like crazy to get back up to momentum, overall your momentum may be the same as a rider who got through it with more momentum and didn't have to pedal as hard. You were able to make up for that with that pedaling, but it's momentum, right? Like you're making up for it, right? There's other ways to get it. And so your skills are a huge part of your ability to maintain and increase your momentum while actually giving your legs and your pedaling a break. And so, like, just because it's a low tension situation doesn't mean that you need to be sitting down. If there's stuff on the trail, if there's any sort of technical stuff that you can be using your technique and your movement to help you, maintain and generate momentum through it, then that's free speed. And that's going to improve your overall skills, just overall efficiency. And so it's actually a really good area for people to work on. But again, a lot of people don't have the endurance for that. Like we spend so much time focused on sitting down. Anytime you're sitting down, you're basically in a pedaling, spot that it prefers pedaling, right? Like that's what it's for. You get your bike fit is around, okay, I got my butt sit here because that is the perfect spot for me to be to pedal my bike. So when you're sitting down, that is what sitting down is for pedaling. And again, I think people need to sit down way too much for pedaling. Like you need to stand up and work on your standing pedaling and only use your seated pedaling for low tension recovery efforts. But again, it's kind of a different quadrant. My 4 pedaling quadrants, pedaling posture quadrants, whatever you want to call it. But anyways, point is that you if you're sitting down, then you're really in kind of this mono movement, right? Like your hips can't move, and so you're really kind of stuck. Like you're really limited as to like how much movement can you actually create with your body? Not much. Okay, so when your butt's on the seat, you tend to be in this mono movement mode, and then you look at like, well, how do you train as a mountain biker? What do you do as a mountain biker to improve? And okay, well, you're doing your cardio training. Well, what's your cardio training? And it's a lot of seated pedaling, a lot of seated spinning. Okay, great. Well, you're just training your body for this position. Like, you have to stand up to get into multi-movement mode. You have to free your hips from the seat in order to use your hips to get into multi-movement. As long as your hips are frozen in space, you're really limited, right? You can create some other movements, but it's super limited compared to what you can create once you get your hips free of that seat. So you can't go into multi-movement mode until you get your butt off the seat. But if you spend all your time training with your butt on the seat, and then you try to stand up and go into multi-movement mode, again, it's inefficient. You're not good with it. And so you're just drawing inordinate amounts of energy in order to fuel it. And so your brain's like, holy shit, we got to get out of this. And sit back down. Ooh, okay, I'm back into my familiar position. I feel more efficient and safe here. And it just reinforces that, like, seated pedaling good, standing pedaling bad. And it's like, no. No, standing pedaling is actually the best thing that you can do. Seated pedaling is a terrible position to be in because, especially as a mountain biker, like we have to be able to move our hips in order to use technique to maintain and generate momentum, stay safe, stay in a safe position. So it's super important that you know that you're efficient with and strong with your standing positions. And so getting into this multi-movement mode is super important for you to train. So as we, now as you start to look at different training methods, right? Like I've talked a lot about, what not to do. Well, what do you want to do, right? What should we do? Well, one of the reasons that I like to use things like combination drills and hybrid exercises, so where you're combining 2 or 3 or more exercises into one movement, is exactly because of this multi-movement demand that our sport has. And so, especially getting into the high tension stuff. So one, this is why kettlebell swings have this like what the heck effect for a lot of people, because kettlebell swings tend to be a mono movement exercise, for being honest about it, but it's a high tension mono movement exercise. And so you're getting into that high tension mode. And so if you've spent your whole life or a lot of time training in this low tension mode, and all of a sudden you start throwing in kettlebell swings and you're starting to fill in this a little bit, it's like, oh, what the heck, right? It's like what the heck effect that you have from the kettlebell. It's no what the heck effect. It's just you're working on your high tension mono movement. And a lot of people don't work on that stuff. And so introducing that high tension component is going to round out your cardio and help you out. And so that's why I like kettlebell swings and things like that to help train the cardio. Again, I talked about how the cardio training programs that I do have, you have what are called high tension, low RPM intervals. And so, man, I forget, like Joel Jamieson wrote about these in his book, MMA conditioning, or I forget what the name of it is. But anyways, this is a method that the Soviets would use to train specifically the cardio demands for this stuff. But it's a high tension, low RPM grind that you need to train. And there's a specific muscles are targeted with that. The cardiovascular system targeting is different with that. And so making sure that you have these intervals in there. And then again, like I said, the combo exercises, hybrid exercises, using things, really just a lot of the strength training strategies. Like I don't like to use strength training for cardio, right? Like I'm not talking about doing like a CrossFit type, like HIIT style circuit. What I'm talking about is using cardio training, like using strength training to build your efficiency, not necessarily your capacity, right? Like I'm not trying to work you really hard with it, but what I'm trying to do is another good example would be doing like a swing goblet squat countdown. So you do like 10 swings, then you do 10 goblet squats, then you do 9 swings, you do 9 goblet squats. And the swing is a rest from the squat, and the squat is a rest from the swing. This is this multi-movement concept that we're not just doing one over and over, we're injecting another movement in there to create this multi-movement demand. So it doesn't have to be overly complicated, right? Like it's not rocket science, but it's just take a look at what are you doing, okay? What training method are you using? Like what training program did you get? And you're taking a look at it. And you're okay, well, what if I was going to categorize this overall program, where would I put this thing, right? Okay, now let me take a look. Like what do I need? What do I need on the trip? And okay, where would I put that? And if they don't line up, well, then you need to look for something that kind of does, right? And so again, using the combo drills, the kettlebell training is really good for this. But again, you're not trying to, there's that fine line between the performance and injury. And my whole riding for a lifetime concept that I've been talking about lately is keeping in mind that your goal is to train, not just to get better tomorrow, but to continue to get better and be able to perform at a good level for years and years and years to come. And so if you're using training methods that break you down in an effort to try to build your capacity very quickly, okay, that may be great if your goal is to improve your performance tomorrow, right? Like you got a race season that your future depends on, right? Like you pay your bills based on how you perform, or you have a legitimate opportunity to do that. Well, then that trade-off is worth it. Okay, that's fine. But if not, then what are you doing? Like why? Like why are you sacrificing your future self's health for something today, right? That's not fair. You think future self's going to be pumped when your knees are blown out, and your back's all hurt, and your shoulders all jacked up, and it's like, why, man? Like, you're getting like, mid-pack at your local race series. Like you weren't even getting a pair of socks out of it. Like what is the deal? Like why are you blowing yourself up over this? And this is again like why, a lot of the training programs that you see out there that are inspired by what the pros do aren't necessarily the best thing for you as an average rider, because you don't have the same goals. Like it's not the same risk to benefit ratio as a pro rider has. And so not understanding that can lead again to some bad training decisions. But again, that's kind of a little bit off topic. But the thing is you can use strength training, things like density training, that's another great one. So you set a timer, and so you have like 2 exercises, and you'll go back and forth. So say like, deadlift and shoulder press, and you'll have a weight that you can easily get for 10 reps, and you'll do, no more than like 8 reps with it. You always stop short of failure, trying to leave a couple reps in the bank. You just go back and forth at your own pace, and you keep track of how many reps do you do in that period of time. And then the next time that you do that workout, you try to beat that number. You try to do more reps in that same period of time. Well, that's called density training. Now you're doing more work in the same period of time. And that is, again, very specific to what we need as riders. And it's also a safe way to work on your cardio. And so through strength training methods and things like that. So anyway, so that's the some of the ways. But this is also, if you really, at the end of the day, this is why riding a mountain bike, riding a mountain bike and riding a mountain bike on trails is the most sport-specific training you can do. And this is also why I encourage people to really learn how to use your trail time effectively for your cardio training. Don't just go out and ride, right? Like what are you trying to accomplish with it? So if you are a downhill racer, again, I know I keep going back to this, but you just see this so much because, people think that they should be able to do well on a 2-hour cross-country ride. And if you're a downhill racer, you should suck on a 2-hour cross-country ride. Like, not suck, right? Like, you're going to be better than average, but you shouldn't be really good at it. Like, if you're spending enough time to be good at a 2-hour cross-country ride, then you're not spending enough time on dominating 5 minutes. Okay, I mean, like a downhiller shouldn't even know that their seat exists. Like, when do you sit down during a downhill race? Like, almost never, right? So you shouldn't be sitting down. Like, when you're sitting down and pedaling, that's not downhill specific. Okay, so you can turn your trail rides into this, like breaking them up, like doing 5 minutes hard and then taking a break and a few minutes easy, kind of like fartlek training, if you're familiar with that from running, where you're interspersing like hard sprints with easy recovery and kind of moderate efforts, and so this is a great way to build your cardio in a kind of an informal way. And so use your trail rides to do that. Again, if you're an enduro racer and you're trying to improve your enduro cardio, take a look at the demands. What are you doing? Okay, you've got these easy transfers, to where you're going to be timed from point A to point B. Point A to point B tends to be a little more downhill, a little more technical, and so you're getting graded, I guess, judged based on that. But you do need to get there in good shape. So so what do you do, right? Just go out for like a 2, 3, 4, 5 hour trail ride? No, like you should be riding like this. It should be transferring to a spot, riding hard for a specific period of time. If you know your local trails and you can mark some stuff out that resembles, again, you're not trying to mimic enduro racing, like the specific trails that you're going to be on, as much as the energy demands. You're just trying to mimic the energy demands that you're going to be using. And so, again, like very few people, like only cross-country riders are going to really benefit from just going out for a hard 2-hour ride. Okay, well, what are their demands? What's their sport? Oh, it's a hard 2-hour ride. Okay, well, that falls within what they do. Okay, but again, so going out for a hard 4-hour ride if you're a cross-country racer is falling out of the specifics of what you actually do with your racing. And so that's really the biggest problem, man. Like, people are just so unfocused with their trail rides and just doing whatever, and then they're like, man, my cardio sucks for racing, and so I need a cardio program. I think that 90% of the cardio training programs out there that people are looking for exist simply because they make crappy use of their trail riding time. And again, this isn't like turning every trail ride into a training ride that's not fun. Okay, that's not what this is. This is just being smart about how you're going out, how you're using your trail time, and so there's ways to do that while still having fun, but making sure that you're still focusing on the specific demands of what you're looking for. So if you want to get better at a sport, at some point you're going to have to do things that you may not want to do, right? Like, I just want to go out for a 2-hour ride. It's like, no, man, today you need to go out and you need to mimic your race and whatever, or some sort of demands from your race, and that's what you need to do. And you'll have rides where you go out and you're just like, you're not worried about that. You're just going out, easy ride, working on skills, things like that, having fun, but you do need, that in there somewhere. So again, like your trail rides are the most important cardio training you can do. And so if you're out on a road bike and in the gym working out and not spending much time on your mountain bike, thinking that these two things are going to make you a better mountain biker, you're sorely mistaken. You should be spending as much time as you can on the mountain bike while using these other things to supplement what you need, which you identify that you need, and also just to keep yourself rounded out and healthy, right? The whole riding for a lifetime. Like if all you do is ride, things are going to get really narrow, and really narrow is not healthy. And so keeping a well-rounded, fitness, or keeping your fitness well-rounded is important for longevity, and longevity is super important for your performance, right? The longer that you can stick with your sport, the better you're going to be. Okay, like, so this is why you see guys who've been riding for 10, 15 years, and they can ride just as well or better than the young bucks who've got more fitness than them, right? Like, it's just, if you ride long enough, you can't help but get better. Okay, you're going to get more efficient, you're going to get better. And so longevity is one of the best performance enhancing techniques or tactics that you can have, right? Just be the last man standing at the end. You don't have to be the most talented guy in the beginning. Just be the last dude standing at the end, and you win on some level. So, but you need that longevity factor in there, and be thinking about that. So that, again, that's where you do need strength training. You do need mobility training. You may need some other cardio training to round out some things. But if you're overemphasizing these things, thinking that they're going to make you a better mountain biker, and those things are keeping you off of your bike, or when you get on your bike, you're so exhausted or so sore and tired that you can't really ride well, then things may be off there. Again, there's a time and place for everything. Like, there's definitely a time to be focused on this off-bike stuff, and the on-bike stuff's going to suffer some. But the majority, right, like 80% plus of your time should be focused on the on-bike stuff, taking the centerpiece, and the other stuff supporting that, not taking away from it. So anyways, so that's going to do it for this. Hopefully you guys have gotten some good info from this and have enjoyed this. Give me some feedback on it. Let me know if you liked it or not. I'm going to be looking to do one of these a week moving forward. Just know that there's a lot of people who are looking for stuff to do. Got a lot of time to train now. And so, just trying to help get some good information out there, help you guys out. Keep your mind off of some of the other things going on for just a little bit, hopefully. And then, so again, let me know what you guys think. Give me some feedback, and appreciate you guys checking it out. And so I hope that this bad boy worked. And let's see here. It says that it did. So boom. All right. Okay, guys, appreciate it, and I'll talk to everybody later.